Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome. My name is Matt Abbott, and I am the Director of Government and Diplomatic Programs at the Chicago Council on Global Affairs. I am honored to welcome Minister Anna Maria Anders to the Council's platform today. I would also like to acknowledge and welcome Deputy Speaker of the Polish Senate, Adam Bielan, as well as Piotr Janicki, the Consul General of Poland in Chicago. Today's program is on the record and we will be live streaming. Please make sure to silence your phones. After the minister's remarks, we will have a question and answer session, and please feel free to submit your questions online at chi.cnf.io. We have several upcoming programs in which you may be interested. On Monday, May 8th, Federal Reserve Bank of Cleveland President Loretta Mester on economic growth and monetary policy. On Monday, May 15th, a panel discussion on the future of Europe and the EU. And on Tuesday, June 13th, we recently added a program on North Korea with several former high-ranking South Korean diplomats and Jean Lee, who opened the AP's Pyongyang Bureau. Turning back to today's program, a brief disclaimer. For nearly a century, the Chicago Council on Global Affairs has provided an independent, nonpartisan platform for a variety of different voices to promote deeper global understanding and active U.S. engagement in the world. Views expressed by individuals we host are their own and do not represent institutional positions or views of the Council. And now a few words about our guest. Anna Maria Anders is both a senator and minister in the Republic of Poland. She is Secretary of State in the government of Poland's Prime Minister, where she is the Plenipotentiary for International Dialogue. Minister Anders also represents Poland in the Women in Parliament's Global Forum, a global network of female parliamentarians that supports greater participation of women in politics and promotes equal rights of women worldwide. I will return to moderate audience question and answer session after the minister's remarks, and now please join me in welcoming Minister Anna Maria Anders.
Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, I am thrilled to be here with you today. I would like to thank the Chicago Council on Global Affairs for inviting me. It is my great pleasure to speak before such a distinguished audience. The Chicago Council on Global Affairs is amongst the most experienced and authoritative think tanks operating in the US. I would like to start by congratulating you on your accomplishments. Clearly, your research has had an impact on the state of international relations. There is much to say on the relationship between the US and Europe in a period of changing world order. The international environment is changing as both old and new powers claim their positions on the world stage. Europe and the United States are not immune to the ongoing challenges. To face them effectively, we need stronger, closer, and wiser transatlantic ties. From my perspective of the Polish Secretary of State for International Dialogue, the Central and Eastern Europe dimension of transatlantic dialogue is of particular importance. But I would like to add that I am not only a minister, as I was introduced, I'm also a senator in the government of Poland. I'm the senator whose district is the northeastern flank. If we remember General Ben Hodges saying maybe 2 or 3 years ago that the Suwałki Gap, which is in my district, is probably the most susceptible to any incursions from Russia. Therefore, I am very, very committed to the safety of my region and to the safety of Poland in general. But I also have to add, from a personal point of view, I have other vested interests in the situation. Namely, my father, or for those who do not know, was General Anders, a very famous war hero. His views, I grew up with his views. He spent 1.5 years in Lubyanka in Moscow. He led 120,000 citizens from Siberia to the Middle East to join up with the Allied forces, culminating in the victorious Battle of Monte Cassino. My father never returned to a free Poland. He and I spent many hours talking about the world when I was a teenager. He passed away when I was 19. I think he taught me skepticism towards Russia that most people would not have. Therefore, I think before we sort of even start talking about this subject, I think generally Poland is afraid. Poland is afraid the history will repeat itself. Germany invaded Poland on the 1st of September in 1939. Russia invaded Poland on the 17th of September in 1939. The 17th September anniversary is very, very fresh in our minds, and September anniversary, and every year there are ceremonies in Poland commemorating the deportation, the beginning of the deportation of 1.3 million people to Russia. Poland fears history will repeat itself, as I said. And I think Poland also fears that then, in 1939, the world stood by as Germany invaded Poland and then Russia invaded Poland. Therefore, Poland, I think, has an inherent mistrust of Europe. I have been asked very frequently on visits to the United States whether I feel that Europe would stand up for Poland if something happened. I think things have changed. I would like to say that they would. However, Europe is facing an enormous array of problems right now. We have the migrants problem, which is a refugee problem, which, as I was just saying to your Vice President here, is huge because we don't really know how to end it. As long as there is wars in the Middle East, we will be facing the refugee problem. Europe itself is in an uncertain situation right now. We've got the election in France coming up on Sunday. We have another election coming up. We will see whether Angela Merkel will get re-elected. And we have Brexit in Europe. I am reluctant to talk about Brexit because I'm also a UK citizen, so what I feel as a UK citizen is not necessarily what I feel as a Pole. What may be good for Britain may not necessarily be good for Poland because it will, weaken the European Union. So all that is uncertain. US-Poland ties have always been strong. I think there was a period where in 2008, when Poland was shaken by the cancellation of the Bush missile defense system by President Obama when he first took office. The September 17th anniversary that I've already mentioned was unfortunate to publicize this cancellation, and it has remained in Poland's minds as, well, was it ignorance or was it deliberate? Again, I would like to prefer to say that it was ignorant. Poland was afraid of Russia since the beginning of the Second World War. But I think that we talked about it, but the world really didn't take it seriously. Crimea, the annexation of Crimea on March 18, 2014, made the world wake up and appreciate the possible military threat from Putin. As recently as 2012, when presidential candidate Mitt Romney said that Russia was America's #1 foe, you remember that President Obama laughed and reminded him that the Cold War was over. Well, I wouldn't call the present situation exactly a Cold War, but much has changed in the world since that debate. We have various wars in the Middle East. We have conflicts in the Ukraine, Africa, and many other parts of the world. There is a terrorist threat in Serbia. There is a buildup of Russian troops in Donbass and Kaliningrad. We have threats from North Korea, and we have the rise and ever-increasing threat of global terrorism. Just recently, we learned about Russia's plan to hold military exercises in Belarus with about 100,000 troops, particularly disconcerting, especially for Poland and the Balkan states. History has shown that once there, Russia will be reluctant to leave. And I'm not sure how we feel about such a large number of Polish troops Russian troops on our border. NATO was established with the signing of the North Atlantic Treaty on April 4, 1949. Today, it has 28 members. Poland joined NATO in 1999. Today, it is one of its strongest supporters and one of only 5 countries that contribute the required 2% of annual GDP. It is interesting to note that the United States contributes 70%. Last year, Poland hosted the NATO summit in Warsaw. Membership in NATO and the EU means both benefits and responsibilities for Poland. We use our membership in NATO and the EU to be part of an overall transatlantic and European response to the challenges we are all confronted with. Obviously, we are focused on countering the threats that affect our security directly, like those coming from the East. However, we are also an active participant of NATO and EU initiatives regarding the threats from other directions, including challenges that theoretically are further from Poland. Transatlantic security has changed. The process of NATO's adaptation began in Wales during the NATO summit in 2014. It was reinforced during the Warsaw summit last year and will continue to work on their path in the Brussels summit at the end of May this year. Challenges and threats are coming from all directions. Russia, through its aggression in Ukraine, combined with the development of its military posture and unpredictability of its activities, has emerged as a strategic challenge. We are also influenced by the instability in the Middle East and North Africa. What is important, those trends appear to be long-term in nature. The decisions taken at the Warsaw Summit have increased the security of all allies, according to the so-called 360 degrees approach. We appreciate that these decisions have increased NATO's ability to respond to challenges and threats coming from all directions. The most important step for the security of the eastern flank is the decision on the NATO Enhanced Forward Presence, EFP, and the Tailored Forward Presence, TFP, to be established on the territory of the Central European allies, including Poland. This constitutes a change to the concept of NATO deterrence and defense in our region. Since the end of the Cold War, the Allied collective defense commitments were to be fulfilled only through a reinforcement strategy. Now it will be accompanied by a long-term combat presence. The significance of the NATO battle groups on the eastern flank lies in the fact they will be constantly on the ground. The decisions adopted during the Warsaw Summit have been a necessary step in light of the overall Russia's military superiority in our region. We expect timely and full implementation of these decisions. It should be a new normal, a constant element of NATO posture. We really appreciate the steps taken by the US to reassure and strengthen the security of the eastern flank of NATO. We welcome the US decisions to deploy American troops to Poland and to the region. Just recently, we welcomed both US and NATO troops in Poland, in Żagań and Orzysz. Poland is not only a beneficiary of the enhanced alliance presence in our country. We actively contribute to the success of the NATO forward presence in the eastern flank. Apart from our resolve to provide significant host nation support for incoming US, British and Romanian forces, we will be part of the Canada-led NATO battle group in Latvia. We have also established the headquarters multinational division Northeast in Elbląg to increase NATO's ability to command and control over 4 NATO battle groups in Poland and the Baltic states. Finally, we contribute to similar measures in Romania, the tailored forward presence. As a part of our share in crisis response, we maintain our contribution to the operation in Afghanistan and Kosovo. We are united with other allies in response to the threats emanating from the south, both within the NATO framework in the Mediterranean and the agencies, as well as in the framework of anti-ISIS coalition. Indeed, we are strongly motivated to continue our support to combat terrorism. Partnership between Poland and the US is crucial to ensure credibility and effectiveness of collective defense in our entire region. Against this background, I would like to stress the role of Armored Brigade Combat Team, ABCT, to be rotated to Poland and other regional allies. We hope that ABCT will be a persistent element of the post-Warsaw security architecture in our region. We are grateful for this deployment. On our side, we will make every effort to facilitate ABCT deployment in the region and to reduce the costs related to it. ABCT is a chance for all countries in the region to strengthen and intensify cooperation with the US. This cooperation would increase our both Central European and US abilities to respond to the threats from the East. Moreover, it would create additional opportunities to cooperate with the US elsewhere. Thus, Poland is ready to continue to facilitate this cooperation. Poland can be a political and military hub for an increasing US presence in our region, a hub facilitating US cooperation with the Baltic states, the Czech Republic, Slovakia, Hungary, Romania, and Bulgaria. We hope that the new American administration will notice and exploit this window of opportunity regarding ABCT. Speaking about chances and windows of opportunity regarding NATO's collective defense, I would like to mention another one. In May, there will be the first visit of President Trump to NATO. One of the messages from this meeting could be the need to further adapt and enhance NATO's collective defensibility. The summit in 2018 would be a really good opportunity to agree on measures regarding this issue. Fair burden sharing in NATO. We fully support US efforts to improve burden sharing in NATO. The future of NATO depends on this burden sharing. We have, in view of the increasing global threats, more and more regions that we have to take care of, and everything increases costs. Poland is already fulfilling the Allied pledge of 2% GDP expenditures on defense, as I already mentioned. We do not want to stop there. We intend to increase our defense budget even further in the upcoming years. Our ambitious plan is to gradually reach the level of 2.5% GDP expenditures on defense in 2030. It is also noteworthy that we are in a small group of several allies devoting the recommended 20% of our budget to armed forces modernization. Our priority is capabilities necessary for the effective defense of our territory, especially air defense. We have chosen to build an air defense system in cooperation with the US. We also support strengthening the EU in a way that leads to an increase in responsibility of Europeans for the security of their continent. However, this process should not undermine the role of NATO and should not weaken the transatlantic bond. Poland is one of the biggest supporters of this bond and of US presence in Europe. To conclude, I would like to stress again that Poland is actively engaged in transatlantic and European initiatives to contribute a fair share and respond to the regional and global challenges coming from all directions. Obviously, we hope for continuation of US leadership in this process, and we are ready to facilitate your increasing engagement in our region. Taking into account the ties between our two nations and the changed security environment, our defense cooperation is worth developing. Equally important is the question of NATO and the EU working together. Unity is the only solution to the global threats we've all faced today. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Minister Anders. We have time for some questions and answers now. For our online audience, as a reminder, you can submit your questions via chi.cnf.io. And for our in-person audience, please raise your arm if you have a question, and I will acknowledge you. A member of our staff will then bring a microphone to you. And please just remember to make your question a question and not a statement. We'll start with a question from our online audience. First off, how does Poland see its role in the EU?
Poland wants to remain in the EU. There has been some talk about the present government wanting to opt out of the EU. That is absolutely not the case. Poland has benefited a lot from the European community. The problems that have arisen between Poland and the European community have been based on several issues. I think bad press being one of them. The government, the previous government, has contributed a lot to causing problems within the EU. We have had differences on the migrant situation. I think it is important to stress that we are not in a position to say that we do not want to accept refugees. We have refugees. We have people that we have now bringing back from areas where they were deported by Russia to Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan. We just recently passed through the Senate, and it has been signed by the President. We have a bill that will finally, after 27 years of Poland being free, of these people being able to return to their homeland. Poland is not a rich country. We have many Ukrainians that are already in our country, in the thousands, hundreds of thousands that have come over the last 2 or 3 years. We are now concentrating on the Poles that are coming from the east. Consequently, what appears to be a reluctance and a sort of lack of sympathy for refugees is simply the fact that we have to concentrate on our own. I'm hoping that these disputes with the EU will come to an end. I think it is extremely important that we work together, because as long as there are these discrepancies, it's not good for the EU and it's not good for our relationship.
Thank you. And another question from our online audience. Who do you trust to protect Poland?
The United States and NATO.
Yes, sir. In the back, please.
Has the shift that you've seen in the U.S. and NATO coming in, is there better cooperation between the security services and the intelligence services? Are you seeing a better sharing of information both from the United States and with your eastern neighbors?
I'm sure there are, but it's, that is really not something that I'm involved with. I am not in that branch. I am not even in the foreign ministry, as it is. I am just somebody who, I think maybe I should also, maybe I didn't even say this. I have another vested interest here. My father, as everybody knows by now, is a Polish general. My husband was a US Army colonel who fought in Vietnam. He passed away almost 10 years ago and is buried at Arlington Cemetery. I'm a US citizen, as well as being a Polish citizen, and a British citizen. But what is important, that I have a son who's 23 years old, who is also in the US military. He's a young officer. He just came back from 3 months in Iraq. And therefore, I have a vested interest in US-Poland cooperation. I would like Poland to be safe. I would like the United States to be safe, and I have a huge belief in the fact that if we work together, it will be for the good of the entire world.
Yes, sir. In the front, Brian Hansen, please.
Thank you very much for your comments and for being here. I appreciate that. I wanted to ask about your view and interpretation of the new administration's policy toward NATO, as well as issues like the defense of Poland. As we know, as a political candidate, Trump talked about whether or not NATO was obsolete, called NATO obsolete. He since reversed and said that NATO is no longer obsolete. But we also know that he's made his highest priority terrorism. And some people have been concerned about what is the level of commitment of the United States to defend NATO. And I was wondering, in addition to words and spoken proclamations, what are the most important things that we should be watching for to be able to see that commitment to NATO defense and to the security concerns that Poland has? What are the actions that are most important?
Well, I attended Women in Parliament forum recently on national security. It was very interesting. Most of the women there were from the Baltic states, Kosovo, and but I was sitting next to a lady who does policy planning for NATO, and she said that at the NATO summit probably global terrorism was going to be one of the issues, but funding was a huge issue, and I think we have to ask ourselves whether NATO should be that involved in the fighting for global terrorism, whether it's in fact not spreading itself too much. I believe that there are training camps for around the world for soldiers, camps to combat terrorism. We cannot do everything. We cannot do everything. I think, fortunately, from the point of view of terrorism, Poland has been spared so far, but a lot of areas in Europe are in danger. And I think that we are probably going to concentrate more on the regular defense issues than global terrorism, simply because of lack of funds. But if I know that President Trump spent a long time with Chancellor Merkel talking about this, about increasing the spending from Germany. Poland was very concerned before the elections about some of President Trump's outspoken comments about Russia, about NATO. And frankly, we were worried. When I was here in, I think, February, and I was on Capitol Hill in February, I had meetings with Senator McCain, Senator Bob Corker, and Mark Thornberry, people who are actually into the national security. They assured me there was no plan to withdraw those forces, and we can see that that has not happened. So I think in Poland we are happy with the situation that it is. We want the US forces to remain, and we want NATO to function. So we are very committed to asking our neighbors to share the cost.
Thank you. Yes, sir, in the center table. And a microphone's coming to you on the other side.
Okay. Sorry. Thank you for excellent presentation. I have two questions. The current presence of the NATO and US assets in Eastern Europe, is it a symbolic presence, or is it really does have a strategic position to deter an attack? Is there an Air Force, Navy, or is it simply a symbol, let's say, that we will defend Poland, will defend Baltic countries, Romania? Could you classify this as a sufficient strength to deter an attack, or is it just a gesture, you might say?
Well, I think the most troubling thing for us is the build-up of Russian forces in Kaliningrad and Donbass. And so I think basically that is what we're concentrating most. But we also discussed during the Women in Parliament forum about also the maritime threat. So I think NATO is looking for all the possible issues right now. The Balkan states have to be protected as well. The terrorist aspect in Serbia. Again, I am not the expert in this area, so I would like to. I don't know. Maybe I'm here with the Deputy Speaker of the Senate. I don't know whether he would like to add something to the discussion. Obviously not. So I don't know. To be honest with you, I'm not sure. I see personally, I can just see from my own point of view, I see the threat from Russia on the eastern flank more than anything else. But we are concerned about other areas. I think if the United States gets involved in North Korea, and conflict with North Korea is going to affect us all, right? If we have worsening of the situation in Syria, it is going to affect us all. Time will tell.
Obviously, this is the area which is most at risk right now. Are there any plans, let's say, to deploy forces along the Polish-Ukraine border, maybe something in Romania, just to simply, again, try to deter, or at least try to send a message that in the event something will happen? And a follow-up question, what are the chances of Ukraine becoming a member of NATO? Is there any activity in that area? And that's all the questions I have. Thank you.
What are the chances of Ukraine becoming a member of NATO? Well, we know what happened when Ukraine wanted to become a member of the EU, So, who knows? Ukraine is a very complicated question. There are politicians more experienced and more savvy than myself who would not be able to answer your question adequately. So if anybody in the audience would like to say a few more words, I would encourage them. I am reluctant to speak on the issue, if you don't mind.
A member of our online audience would like to know, do you think that other NATO members need to contribute more of their GDP to NATO, and how can other members be convinced to do so?
Well, unfortunately, I think that a crisis always motivates people to do something. I hate to think what kind of crisis it would be. I would imagine that NATO members who are wealthy enough to be able to contribute should contribute. How you persuade them, I really honestly don't know. I hope that it's not going to take some massive crisis in order for them to wake up. But the lady from the NATO, the policy planning, said this is a crucial point because they cannot tell what the future of NATO is going to be unless they get more funding.
And you've previously mentioned your work at the Women in Parliament Forum. I'd like to know more about what can be done to get more women involved in public service.
Well, I think this is a wonderful organization. I have only been a member for a few months. Well, I haven't been in the government for that long. But I'm honored to be there. I think we want to get more women involved in politics. In Poland, this is actually not an issue. We have a Polish Prime Minister. We have many people in the Polish government. But there are. When I was in Iran recently, I suggested that maybe somebody from Iran would join the Women in Parliament. We're concentrating mainly on those countries which do not allow the same kind of privileges for women. So we want to get these women involved. One of the people present at our conference was the previous president of Kosovo. So it's a very high-powered team of women. So they want to make a difference. The comments that they made were varied. It was interesting to note the different comments between Georgia and Estonia, Lithuania. I was interested that Lithuania, for example, knew exactly what I was talking about when we talked about Russia and so on. So the aim of Women in Parliament is to increase this, and in fact, I was asked to see whether there would be a women's organization in the United States that could perhaps send a member in the United States. I think from the US, you will probably need more than one member. We have so many states, But I think, it's growing, and we want to make people aware of it.
Thank you. Another question from our online audience. Given Russian actions in Ukraine, how would you like to see relations with Russia develop in the future? And that's in a Polish-Russian context.
Well, Ukraine is an absolutely wonderful country. It is very, very sad what is happening in Ukraine. There are huge nationalistic issues in Ukraine which date back, to Poland. Strife between Poland and Ukraine goes back many, many years. So it makes all the situation very, very complicated. Again, I would say exactly what I said before. I am not an expert in the area, so I would defer to somebody who knows a little bit more about it.
And another online question, can you comment on Poland's internal political dynamics and what the current government wants to achieve while it's in power?
Poland is doing well. Contrary to what we read in the press, Poland is doing well. I am extremely disturbed by some of the comments that I read. I was at a reception in Washington, D.C. to celebrate the May the 3rd Constitution Day, and there were actually leaflets being handed around to foreign guests protesting against the Polish government. the Polish government's greatest enemies have come from the Polish people themselves. People who lost the election and were not happy about losing the election. I honestly believe that internal problems should stay within the country. I don't see much, for example, in the UK of British politicians complaining about the country, even when they lost or won. I don't see American politicians complaining outside the country. We certainly are a democratic country. If we were not a democratic country, we would not allow for protests in the streets. You can read what you want, you can watch what you want. As I said already, there are many women in politics in Poland. So the question of women's rights is absurd. And I just feel that we don't have enough of a positive narrative. For me, some questions like for example, the repatriation bill is a huge positive narrative because it's a tremendous achievement to Poland, you know? I mean, those people who got deported so many years ago, again, maybe I have a vested interest in this as my father's daughter. My father's dream when he was forming the Anders Army in Russia in 1941, his dream was every Pole should be able to come back to Poland. And his famous quote was, "We will get there, not all of us, but we will get there." I feel as his daughter, I have felt from the beginning, even before I got into politics, that my mission would be to enable those people to come back to Poland. My father's book in Poland is Without the Last Chapter. In Britain, or in English, it was translated as An Army in Exile, which does not have the same connotations. We are very proud of this achievement. We are proud of other achievements in Poland. The economic situation in Poland is much better than it is thought. Minister Morawiecki was here in the United States not so long ago. It was a huge hit, you know. So I think we are on the right track. We have a lot of internal problems, conflicts coming from other parties. There are many opposing parties. It's not that I don't believe in opposition. I think opposition is really good. I think you need opposition. But you need an opposition with a message. We have so many different parties, and all I can see right now is everybody is negative, everybody's criticizing the government, but that doesn't seem to be able to present an alternative. I think an opposition party is very good, because then voters can decide for themselves which side that they believe in, which side they want to support.
Another online question. You've mentioned the Balkans a few times. How can Poland help the Balkan countries on their way to potential EU accession?
Well, we have the Balkans, we are concerned about the Balkans because we all share the same concerns. Now we have the US troops in the Balkan states too. We have to think about this because we had conflicts there in the past. And the lady at the meeting said that they are very grateful to the US for rescuing them before. And it's a question of whether they would be again. I think Poland supports the Balkan states. Whether they will ever get a place in the EU, who knows?
We have time for one final question. Sir, at the table in front, please. If you could raise your arm, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for coming here. Welcome to Chicago. I was curious if the other members of EU or of NATO who are part of EU are distracted right now with all of the nationalism that's going on in the elections, and then the economic threats and the immigration. It feels like there's so much going on over there that you could easily sort of make NATO less of a priority. And so coming here, it feels important to have our support, but what about the homeland support of Europe?
Yeah, well, there are a lot of issues. There are a lot of issues. We have, as I said, the future of Europe really depends an awful lot on who wins these elections and which way they're going to turn. If France were to leave the EU, I think the danger would be that the EU would fall apart. If Angela Merkel gets re-elected, then probably would continue in the same vein. But if somebody else were to get re-elected, who knows? Which is why I think that as much as I would like it to continue, I think it's a little shaky. We have to see what happens also with the British elections now, because that is not a done deal. I think it took everybody by surprise that Prime Minister May decided to call an election so soon after the referendum and so soon after the previous elections. I hope she's on the right track. It looks as if she is. I understand why she's doing it. She wants more support in Parliament for Brexit. But I think we really have to wait and see. I think the next few months are crucial in this. The NATO summit now in Brussels, as I say, I think it will concentrate on how we can fight terrorism, but it will focus very much on spending. So I think maybe it's just too early to talk about all this. I would be inclined to wait maybe 6 months and see which way everybody is going within Europe, to see which way we're going to go.
Thank you. Before we conclude, the minister does have an engagement immediately after this, so if I could ask you to please remain in your seats while she departs. And we do have an event immediately in this room afterwards, so if you would like to stay for some networking, if we could ask you to please do so in the lobby of the building. But please join me in thanking Minister Anders for joining us today on our platform.